the stagecoach lurched to a violent stop outside the trading post in Shoshone, Idaho, sending dust spiraling into the crisp autumn air of 1883. And Lillian Reynolds knew, before she even stepped down, that her carefully planned escape from Philadelphia society had just become far more complicated than she had imagined. Her traveling trunk had split open during the rough journey through the Snake River Canyon, spilling delicate dresses and leather-bound books across the rutted Main Street. Lillian stood frozen for a moment, watching prairie wind scatter her former life like autumn leaves, her cheeks burning with embarrassment as curious townspeople paused to stare at the city woman in her impractical traveling suit and feathered hat. "Let me help you with that, madam." The voice came from behind her, low and careful, as though the speaker was unused to offering assistance to strangers. Lillian turned and found herself looking up at a man who seemed carved from the very landscape surrounding them. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of sage after rainfall. Dust covered his worn denim pants and faded cotton shirt, and a weathered hat sat low on his brow, shadowing a face that might have been handsome if not for the wariness etched into every line. He kept his distance, she noticed, as though afraid his very presence might offend her. "I would appreciate that very much, thank you," Lillian said, gathering her composure despite the disaster unfolding around her. "I am afraid I packed rather optimistically for frontier life." The cowboy's mouth twitched slightly, not quite a smile. He moved past her with careful precision, keeping several feet of distance between them as he began collecting her scattered belongings. His movements were efficient and respectful, never lingering over her more personal items, instead gathering them quickly and placing them back in the damaged trunk with a gentleness that seemed at odds with his rough exterior. "Name's Isaac Brennan," he said without looking up from his task. "I work the Bennett Ranch about 5 miles north of town. You must be the new schoolteacher everyone's been talking about." "Lillian Reynolds," she replied, kneeling to help despite her restrictive skirts. "And yes, I suppose I am. Though at the moment, I feel rather more like a spectacle than a teacher." Isaac glanced up briefly, and she caught something in his eyes that might have been understanding. "Folks here don't mean any harm, just not much happens in Shoshone. New arrival from back east is about the most exciting thing we have seen since the silver mine closed last spring." As they worked together, Lillian noticed Isaac's hands. They were large and calloused, scarred across the knuckles and darkened by years of outdoor labor. He handled her belongings with surprising delicacy despite their roughness, treating each item as though it were made of glass. When he reached for a volume of poetry at the same moment she did, their fingers brushed accidentally, and he jerked back as though burned. "Sorry," he said quickly, his jaw tightening. "I did not mean to." "It is quite all right," Lillian assured him, confused by his reaction. "You are being tremendously helpful. I cannot thank you enough." Isaac simply nodded and continued working in silence. Within minutes, they had gathered everything, though the trunk itself was beyond immediate repair. He lifted it effortlessly, muscles flexing beneath his shirt, and gestured toward the boarding house at the end of the street. "Mrs. Patterson runs a clean establishment. She has been preparing a room for you. I can carry this there if you would like." "That would be wonderful," Lillian said, falling into step beside him. She had to walk quickly to match his long stride, and after a moment he seemed to notice and slowed his pace. "Have you lived in Shoshone long, Mr. Brennan?" "All my life," he replied, eyes fixed straight ahead. "Grew up on the Bennett Ranch. My father worked there until he passed about 10 years back. Mr. Bennett kept me on, taught me the trade. Ranching's all I know." There was something in his tone that suggested this was both a statement of fact and a limitation he felt keenly. Lillian wanted to ask more, but they had reached the boarding house, a tidy two-story structure with fresh white paint and flower boxes in the windows. Isaac set her trunk on the porch with careful precision, then stepped back immediately, maintaining that same cautious distance. "Welcome to Shoshone, Miss Reynolds," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "I hope you find it to your liking." "Wait," Lillian called as he turned to leave. "Will I see you again? I would like to thank you properly, perhaps invite you to tea once I am settled." Isaac's expression shifted, becoming carefully neutral. "I do not think that would be appropriate, madam. You are a lady and a teacher. I am just a ranch hand, but I wish you well." He was gone before she could protest, striding back toward the main street with determined purpose. Lillian stood on the porch, bewildered by the encounter and by the strange flutter of disappointment in her chest. She had come west to escape the suffocating expectations of Philadelphia society, to build a life based on her own merits rather than her family's name and money. Yet here was a man who seemed to believe the same rigid class divisions existed even on the frontier. Mrs. Patterson proved to be a cheerful widow in her 50s, delighted to have a cultured woman as a boarder. She showed Lillian to a comfortable room on the second floor, overlooking Shoshone's Main Street, and insisted on preparing tea while Lillian unpacked what she could from her damaged trunk. "That Isaac Brennan is a good man," Mrs. Patterson said later as they sat in the boarding house parlor. "Quiet, keeps to himself mostly, but honest and hardworking. His mother died when he was born, and his father raised him alone until the consumption took him." Isaac was only 16 then, but Mr. Bennett saw potential in him. He has been the ranch foreman for 3 years now, youngest in the territory. "He seems very capable," Lillian said carefully, sipping her tea, "though I confess I found him rather difficult to talk to. He maintained such formality, as though I might shatter if he spoke too freely." Mrs. Patterson smiled knowingly. "Isaac has certain ideas about his place in the world. He works with his hands, sees himself as rough and unrefined. He reads, though, more than most folks know. Comes to the trading post every month and trades goods for books. I think he is lonely, but he has convinced himself that refined company is not for the likes of him." "That seems terribly sad," Lillian murmured, thinking of Isaac's careful hands and the intelligence she had glimpsed in his eyes. "Everyone deserves companionship. Perhaps you will teach him that," Mrs. Patterson said with a meaningful look. "You seem like a young woman who does not put much stock in society's arbitrary rules." Lillian spent the next few days preparing for the opening of the school. The schoolhouse was a simple structure at the edge of town. One large room with a wood stove, rows of benches, and a chalkboard that had seen better days. She had 14 students enrolled, ranging from 6 to 15 years old, children of ranchers, shopkeepers, and the few remaining miners who had stayed after the silver boom ended. She threw herself into lesson planning, organizing books and supplies, and introducing herself to the families whose children she would teach. Yet her thoughts kept returning to Isaac Brennan and their brief encounter. She found herself watching for him whenever she walked through town, hoping for another chance meeting, though she could not quite explain why even to herself. The opportunity came the following Sunday. Lillian attended services at Shoshone's small church, a modest building that served multiple denominations depending on which circuit preacher happened to be passing through. She spotted Isaac immediately, sitting alone in the back pew, hat in his hands, looking profoundly uncomfortable in clean clothes and a neatly pressed shirt. After the service, as the congregation mingled outside in the warm September sunshine, Lillian made her way toward him. He saw her approaching and seemed to consider fleeing, but good manners apparently won out because he stood his ground, though his expression grew guarded. "Good morning, Mr. Brennan," Lillian said warmly. "I am glad to see a familiar face. I was hoping I might speak with you about something." "Madam," he acknowledged with a slight nod. "How are you finding Shoshone?" "Wonderful, actually. The townspeople have been incredibly welcoming, and I am excited to begin teaching tomorrow." She paused, gathering her courage. "I wanted to thank you again for your help last week." "You were very kind, and I never properly expressed my gratitude." "No thanks necessary," Isaac said quietly. "Anyone would have done the same." "Perhaps, but you were the one who did it," Lillian persisted. "I wonder if you might do me another favor. I need some help repairing my trunk, and Mrs. Patterson mentioned you are skilled with woodworking. Would you be willing to take a look at it? I would pay you, of course." Isaac shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. "I could not take your money for something so simple. I will come by the boarding house this afternoon and see what I can do." "Thank you," Lillian said, rewarded with a brief softening of his stern expression. "Would you stay for dinner afterward? Mrs. Patterson always makes far too much food, and I would enjoy the company." She watched him wrestle with the invitation, politeness warring with whatever instinct made him maintain such distance. Finally, he said, "That is very kind, but I should get back to the ranch. We have a lot of work with the cattle drive coming up." Disappointment bloomed in Lillian's chest, but she managed a gracious smile. "I understand. Another time, perhaps." Isaac arrived at the boarding house just after noon, carrying a wooden toolbox worn smooth with age and use. He examined the broken trunk with careful attention, running those scarred, capable hands over the damaged joints and split hinges. Lillian watched him work from the porch, fascinated by his complete absorption in the task. "This is good craftsmanship," he said after a few minutes. "Made to last. The wood just dried out during your journey made it brittle. I can repair it, but it will take a few days. I will need to soak these pieces, reshape the joints." "Whatever you think is best," Lillian said. "I trust your judgment." Isaac glanced up at her, surprise flickering across his face as though he was unaccustomed to having his judgment trusted. "I will take it back to the ranch workshop, bring it back when it is finished." "Would you like some water before you go?" Lillian offered. "It is quite warm today." He hesitated, then nodded. "That would be appreciated." Lillian hurried inside and returned with a glass of cool water from the pump. Isaac drank it gratefully, and she noticed the way the afternoon sunlight caught the gold and amber tones in his brown hair, the strong line of his jaw, the quiet strength that seemed to radiate from him. When he handed the glass back, their fingers brushed again, and this time he did not pull away quite so quickly. "Miss Reynolds," he said slowly, as though the words were difficult, "I want you to understand something. I am grateful for your kindness, but you should know that folks in town will talk if they see you spending time with someone like me. You are a teacher, a respectable woman. I am just a cowboy with dirt under my fingernails and no education to speak of. I would not want to damage your reputation before you have even begun your work here." Lillian felt a flash of irritation at the rigid social conventions that had followed her even to the frontier. "Mr. Brennan, I came to Idaho specifically to escape that sort of narrow thinking. I am capable of choosing my own friends, and I do not care what people might say about it." "You should care," Isaac said quietly. "Your position here depends on the good opinion of the parents whose children you will teach. If they think you are not respecting proper boundaries, they could make things very difficult for you." "Are you married, Mr. Brennan?" Lillian asked suddenly. The question seemed to startle him. "No, madam. Am I married?" "No." "Then I fail to see why two unmarried adults cannot share a conversation and perhaps a meal without causing scandal." She crossed her arms, fixing him with a determined look. "Unless you simply do not enjoy my company, in which case I will certainly leave you in peace." Isaac's jaw worked as though he was grinding his teeth. When he finally spoke, his voice was rougher than before. "It is not that I do not enjoy your company, Miss Reynolds. That is precisely the problem. You are educated, refined, from a good family back east. I have nothing to offer someone like you except hard work and rough hands that are better suited to mending fences than holding conversations over tea." "That is the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard," Lillian said before she could stop herself. "Mr. Brennan, in the past 20 minutes, you have demonstrated skill, intelligence, and thoughtfulness. You speak well. You are clearly well-read despite your claims otherwise, and you have been nothing but courteous. Why you have decided you are somehow inferior is completely beyond me." Isaac stared at her, apparently rendered speechless. A muscle jumped in his jaw and his hands tightened around the handle of his toolbox. "You do not know anything about me," he said finally. "Then tell me," Lillian challenged. "Stay for dinner. Talk to me. Let me get to know you beyond these ridiculous assumptions you have made about what I want or expect." For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, the air between them charged with something Lillian could not quite name. She was acutely aware of the way Isaac stood, the set of his shoulders, the intensity in his storm-colored eyes. Her heart was beating faster than it should, and she felt simultaneously brave and terrified. "One dinner," Isaac said finally, so quietly she almost missed it. "But if anyone takes issue with it, I will not come back." "Agreed," Lillian said quickly, before he could change his mind. "Mrs. Patterson serves at 6 o'clock. Isaac loaded her damaged trunk into his wagon and drove away, leaving Lillian alone on the porch with a smile she could not quite suppress. Mrs. Patterson appeared in the doorway behind her, wearing an expression of poorly concealed delight. "I could not help but overhear," the older woman said. "You have accomplished something rather remarkable, my dear. Isaac Brennan has not accepted a social invitation in the 3 years I have lived here. He is remarkably stubborn about maintaining distance," Lillian observed. "Why does he believe so firmly that he is somehow unworthy of normal human connection?" Mrs. Patterson's expression grew thoughtful. "His father filled his head with ideas about knowing your place, about not reaching above your station. Old Henry Brennan was a good man but bitter about his own limited prospects. He taught Isaac to work hard and expect nothing, to be grateful for whatever scraps of approval came his way. Isaac learned those lessons too well. He does not see his own worth because he has spent his whole life being told he should not want more than what he has." "That breaks my heart," Lillian said softly. "Everyone deserves to dream, to want more, to believe they are worthy of good things. Perhaps you will teach him that, Mrs. Patterson said, patting her shoulder. "Now come inside and help me prepare a dinner worth staying for." They spent the afternoon cooking, preparing roasted chicken with vegetables from Mrs. Patterson's garden, fresh bread, and apple pie made from fruit preserved from the previous autumn. Lillian changed into one of her nicer dresses, a deep blue cotton with modest lace trim, telling herself she was simply being polite while knowing the truth was more complicated. Isaac arrived exactly at 6, freshly scrubbed and wearing the same clean shirt from church. He looked deeply uncomfortable, holding his hat in his hands and standing rigidly in the boarding house parlor as though he expected to be thrown out at any moment. Mrs. Patterson greeted him warmly and ushered them both into the dining room, where she had set the table with her good dishes. The meal began in awkward silence, Isaac eating with careful precision and volunteering nothing beyond polite responses to direct questions. Lillian found herself working harder than she ever had to maintain a conversation, talking about her journey from Philadelphia, her hopes for the school, the beauty of the Idaho landscape. Gradually, almost imperceptibly, Isaac began to relax. "Have you always wanted to be a teacher?" he asked during a pause in her monologue, surprising her with the question. "Yes," Lillian said, grateful for his engagement. "Though my parents had other plans. They expected me to marry well, to become a proper society wife hosting parties and managing a household. When I insisted on attending normal school to get my teaching certificate, they were horrified. We had rather a significant disagreement about it." "But you did it anyway," Isaac observed. "I did," Lillian confirmed. "I believe everyone deserves an education, regardless of their circumstances. I wanted to teach somewhere that I could make a real difference, not just instruct the already privileged children of wealthy families. When I saw the advertisement for a teacher in Idaho, it seemed perfect." Isaac studied her for a moment, something like respect in his eyes. "That took courage. Leaving everything familiar, traveling alone to a place you had never seen." "Perhaps," Lillian said. "Or perhaps I was simply running away from expectations I could not meet. Either way, I am here now, and I intend to make the most of it. What kinds of books do you read?" Isaac asked suddenly, then seemed embarrassed by his own boldness. "I noticed you had several in your trunk. I did not mean to pry, I love that question," Lillian assured him, her face lighting up. "I read everything I can find. Poetry, novels, history, philosophy. I brought Shakespeare and Whitman, some Dickens, Louisa May Alcott. What about you? Mrs. Patterson mentioned you are a reader as well." Isaac's ears turned slightly red. "I trade for books at the post when I can, mostly whatever Mr. Hobson has available. I have read some Mark Twain, James Fenimore Cooper, some dime novels about the frontier that are probably not very accurate." He paused, then added quietly, "I wish I had more education. I can read well enough, and I know basic mathematics from helping Mr. Bennett with the ranch accounts, but there is so much I do not know." "Education is not just what happens in a classroom," Lillian said gently. "You have learned practical skills that I will never possess. You understand animals, land management, construction, survival. That is valuable knowledge." "It is knowledge that keeps you alive on the frontier," Isaac agreed, "but it does not make you interesting to talk to over dinner." "I am finding you very interesting," Lillian said honestly. "In fact, I am enjoying this conversation more than I have enjoyed any in recent memory." The dinner parties in Philadelphia were full of people discussing fashionable topics they did not care about with people they did not particularly like. "This feels real." Isaac met her eyes across the table, and something passed between them, a moment of genuine connection that made Lillian's breath catch. Mrs. Patterson, who had been quietly eating and observing, chose that moment to excuse herself, claiming she needed to check on something in the kitchen, leaving them alone. "Miss Reynolds," Isaac said after a moment of silence, "I want to be honest with you. I do not know how to do this, whatever this is. I have never been friends with someone like you. I am going to say the wrong thing or embarrass you, and I do not want to cause you problems." "Then we will figure it out together," Lillian said simply. "And please call me Lillian. If we are going to be friends, we should at least use our given names." "Lillian," Isaac repeated as though testing how the name felt. "That is a pretty name, suits you." "And Isaac is a strong name," she replied. "Biblical, it means laughter." "My mother chose it," he said quietly. "My father told me she was laughing when I was born, happy even though she knew she was dying. He said she wanted me to have a name that would remind me there was joy in the world, even when things were hard." Lillian felt tears prick her eyes at the profound sadness of that story. "She sounds like she was a wonderful woman. I am so sorry you did not get to know her." "Me too," Isaac said simply. "My father did his best, but he was a hard man, not cruel, just worn down by life. He taught me to work, to be honest, to keep my word, but he never taught me how to be happy. I do not think he knew how. It is not too late to learn, Lillian said softly. Happiness is not something that just happens. It is something you choose, something you create for yourself. Isaac's expression was unreadable. Is that what you are doing here, creating happiness? I am trying to, Lillian admitted. I was not happy in Philadelphia. I felt trapped, suffocated by expectations and rules that made no sense to me. Here, I have the chance to build a life that feels authentic, to do work that matters. That is a kind of happiness, I think. They talked long after the meal ended, conversation flowing more easily as the evening progressed. Isaac told her about the ranch, about the cattle and horses he worked with, about the satisfaction of hard physical labor and the peace of the open range. Lillian shared stories from her childhood, from her studies, from the books she loved. She discovered he had a dry sense of humor that emerged when he felt comfortable, a quiet intelligence that shone through his self-deprecation. When Isaac finally stood to leave, well past dark, he seemed different somehow. Less guarded, more present. "Thank you for dinner," he said to Mrs. Patterson, who had reappeared to clear the dishes. "It was excellent." "You are welcome any time, Mr. Brennan," Mrs. Patterson said warmly. "It is nice to see this parlor used for its intended purpose." At the door, Isaac turned to Lillian. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for insisting. I have not talked like that with anyone in a long time, maybe ever." "I enjoyed it very much," Lillian said honestly. "Would you come back?" "Perhaps we could have dinner again next Sunday after church." Isaac hesitated, old habits warring with new possibilities. Finally, he nodded. "I would like that, if you are certain." "I am very certain," Lillian assured him. She watched from the porch as he drove away into the darkness, the sound of wagon wheels fading into the night. Her heart felt full in a way she had not anticipated, and she realized with some surprise that she was already looking forward to seeing him again. The next morning, Lillian opened her school to 14 curious, excited, and slightly nervous students. They ranged from little Emma Harris, barely 6 years old with blonde braids and missing front teeth, to Thomas Carmichael, 15 and clearly resentful about being forced back to school when he believed he should be working full-time on his family's ranch. Lillian threw herself into teaching with passionate dedication. She organized her students by ability rather than age, creating reading groups and mathematics lessons tailored to individual needs. She incorporated practical lessons about Idaho history and geography, making education relevant to their lives. She read aloud every afternoon, introducing them to literature and poetry, to worlds beyond Shoshone. The work was exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure. Some days she collapsed into bed feeling triumphant, convinced she was making a difference. Other days she questioned everything, worried she was failing to reach her students, wondering if she had made a terrible mistake coming west. Through it all, she found herself thinking about Isaac more than was probably appropriate. She watched for him in town, her heart lifting whenever she caught sight of his tall figure or heard his wagon passing by. The days until Sunday seemed to stretch endlessly. True to his word, Isaac returned the following week with her repaired trunk. The transformation was remarkable. He had carefully steamed and reshaped the wood, reinforced the joints, and even added decorative metalwork to the corners. It looked better than it had when new. "This is incredible," Lillian said, running her hands over the smooth repairs. "You have a real gift for this work." Isaac shrugged off the compliment, but she could see he was pleased. "Just takes patience and the right tools. I am glad you are happy with it." They had dinner again that Sunday, and it became a pattern over the following weeks. Every Sunday after church, Isaac would come to the boarding house, and they would share a meal and conversation. Slowly, incrementally, the wall Isaac had built around himself began to crumble. He brought her small gifts, things he made himself, handcrafted with obvious care. A wooden box for her teaching supplies with a fitted lid and brass hinges. A bookmark carved with delicate leaves and flowers. A stepping stool for reaching the high shelves in the schoolhouse. Each gift was practical and beautiful, created by those rough, scarred hands with surprising artistry. Lillian treasured each one, not just for the object itself, but for what it represented. Isaac was reaching out in the only way he knew how, offering pieces of himself through his work. She responded by lending him books, by saving interesting articles from the newspapers that came through town, by sharing her world with him as he shared his with her. October arrived with crisp mornings and golden aspens turning the mountainsides into flame. The cattle drive Isaac had mentioned came and went, taking him away for 2 weeks that felt interminably long to Lillian. When he returned, dusty and exhausted, he came straight to the boarding house before even returning to the ranch. "I missed our dinners," he said simply when Lillian answered the door, surprise and delight warring on her face. "I thought about them every night on the trail." "I missed them too," Lillian admitted, her heart racing at his unexpected appearance and the open honesty of his statement. "Come in. You look like you could use a hot meal." Mrs. Patterson, bless her, produced dinner with remarkable speed, and they sat together in the parlor while Isaac told stories about the drive. He was more animated than Lillian had ever seen him, his natural reticence overcome by genuine enthusiasm for his work. He described the vast herds, the river crossings, the challenge of keeping thousands of cattle moving in the right direction. His face was sunburned, his hands even more scarred than before, but his eyes were bright with accomplishment. "You love it," Lillian observed. "The work, the land, all of it. It is written all over your face when you talk about it." "I do," Isaac admitted. "There is something about being out there, just you and the animals and the sky. You feel small but also part of something bigger. It is hard to explain." "You just did," Lillian said softly, "and beautifully." Isaac looked at her for a long moment, something intense and unguarded in his expression. "Lillian," he said quietly, "these past few months, getting to know you, spending time with you, it has changed things for me. Changed how I see myself, maybe. I find myself wanting things I never let myself want before." Lillian's breath caught. "What kinds of things?" He stood abruptly, pacing to the window, his back to her. "Things I have no right to want. You deserve someone educated, someone who can match you intellectually, someone who does not smell like horses and cattle most of the time. Not a ranch hand who will never be more than what he is right now." Lillian rose and crossed the room to stand beside him, though she did not touch him. "Isaac Brennan, you are one of the most frustrating men I have ever met. You are intelligent, talented, kind, and interesting. You make me laugh, you challenge me to think differently, you see the world in ways I never considered. Why can you not see what I see when I look at you?" "Because when I look at my hands," Isaac said roughly, holding them up between them, "I see calluses and scars. I see proof that I work with my body, not my mind. I see hands that are too rough for someone like you, hands that would not know how to hold a lady properly." Something fierce and tender bloomed in Lillian's chest. She reached out and took his hands in hers, ignoring his sharp intake of breath. His hands were large and warm, the skin rough as he had said, marked by years of hard labor. She traced one finger along a scar across his knuckles, feeling the ridge of healed tissue. "These hands repaired my trunk when no one else offered to help," she said quietly. "These hands create beautiful things." These hands care for animals and build fences and do 100 tasks I could never manage. These hands are strong and capable and honest." She looked up, meeting his eyes. "These hands are perfect for holding mine." For a heartbeat, Isaac stood frozen, his eyes wide with something like wonder. Then slowly, carefully, his fingers tightened around hers. His hands were rough, the calluses catching slightly against her softer skin, but they were warm and steady and felt absolutely right. "Lillian," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I am falling in love with you. I have been for weeks now, maybe since that first day when you were not afraid to challenge me, to push past all my defenses. But I do not know if I can be what you need. I am just a cowboy with rough hands and big dreams I have never let myself voice." "Then voice them now," Lillian said, her heart soaring even as tears pricked her eyes. "Tell me your dreams, Isaac. Share them with me." He looked down at their joined hands, his thumb moving in small circles against her palm. "I dream of having my own ranch someday. Not big, maybe just a few 100 acres, enough for a small herd and some horses. I dream of building a house with my own hands, something solid that will last. I dream of having a family, children who will grow up knowing they are loved and wanted, who will have opportunities I never had. And lately," he paused, swallowing hard, "lately I dream of all those things with you beside me." Lillian could not stop the tears that spilled over. "I am falling in love with you too," she whispered. "You make me feel seen in a way no one ever has. You respect my mind and my choices. You do not try to change me or make me fit into some predetermined role. With you, I can be fully myself." Isaac raised one hand to her face, his rough palm cupping her cheek with exquisite gentleness. "You are the most remarkable woman I have ever met, beautiful and brilliant and brave. I still do not understand what you see in me, but I am grateful for it." "I see my future," Lillian said simply, "if you want the same thing." Instead of answering with words, Isaac leaned down and kissed her. It was tender and cautious at first, as though he was afraid of breaking something precious. Lillian rose on her toes and kissed him back, threading her fingers through his hair, trying to convey everything she felt through the connection between them. His arms came around her, strong and sure, and she felt safer and more desired than she ever had in her life. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "I never thought I could have this," he said quietly. "Never thought I deserved it." "You deserve everything good in this world," Lillian told him fiercely. "And I intend to spend a very long time proving that to you." They stood together in the gathering darkness, holding each other, while outside the window Shoshone settled into evening quiet. Mrs. Patterson, who had been tactfully absent, returned with tea and pie and a knowing smile that suggested she had heard at least some of their conversation. "I suppose congratulations are in order," she said warmly. "Though I must say, I saw this coming from the moment you first met." "Were we that obvious?" Lillian asked, feeling her cheeks warm. "Completely transparent," Mrs. Patterson said cheerfully. "Young love usually is, but that does not make it any less wonderful. Now sit down and have some pie while you figure out what comes next." What came next, it turned out, was more complicated than simply declaring their love. Shoshone was a small town with traditional values, and the idea of the schoolteacher courting a ranch hand raised eyebrows and generated considerable gossip. Lillian heard whispers when she walked through town, saw the disapproving looks from some of the more prominent families. The school board, consisting of 5 local men including the mayor and the owner of the general store, called a meeting 2 weeks after word got out about her relationship with Isaac. Lillian attended with her head high and her stomach churning with anxiety. "Miss Reynolds," Mayor Harrison began, his tone formal and stern, We have heard some concerning reports about your conduct. As the school teacher, you hold a position of moral authority in this community. Your behavior reflects on all of us. What exactly is concerning about my conduct?" Lillian asked, keeping her voice level despite her anger. "I have been punctual, dedicated to my students, and maintained appropriate professional standards in all my interactions. Your association with Isaac Brennan is what concerns us," Mr. Hobson from the Trading Post said bluntly. "He is a fine young man in his place, but that place is not courting the schoolteacher. There are standards to maintain. Standards that say a hardworking, honest man is not good enough because he works with his hands instead of keeping ledgers," Lillian challenged. "I came west believing the frontier valued people for who they are, not for arbitrary class distinctions. Was I wrong about that?" The five men shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Chen, who owned a small restaurant and whose daughter was one of Lillian's students, spoke up. "My daughter speaks very highly of you, Miss Reynolds. She says you are the best teacher she has ever had. But some of the other families are talking about withdrawing their children if you continue this relationship. We cannot afford to lose students." Lillian's heart sank, but she kept her expression composed. "I understand your concerns. However, I will not end a relationship with a good man simply because some people have outdated ideas about social hierarchy. If the parents choose to withdraw their children, that is their choice. But I will not compromise my principles or my personal happiness to appease prejudice." "That is a very brave stand," Mayor Harrison said slowly, "but it might cost you your position here." "Then so be it," Lillian said quietly, though the words hurt to say. "Some things are more important than security." She left the meeting not knowing whether she still had a job. Isaac was waiting outside, having insisted on accompanying her to town, despite her protestations that his presence might make things worse. When he saw her face, he immediately moved to her side. "What happened?" he asked, his voice tight with concern. Lillian explained the situation as they walked back toward the boarding house. Isaac's expression grew progressively darker, a muscle jumping in his jaw as anger built behind his carefully controlled exterior. "This is my fault," he said finally. "I should have stayed away from you. I knew this would happen, knew people would make trouble. You should not lose your job because of me." "Stop it," Lillian said sharply, stopping in the middle of the street and turning to face him. "This is not your fault. This is the fault of small-minded people who value appearance over substance. If I lose my job, it will be because I chose to stand up for what I believe in, which includes the right to care about whomever I choose." "But teaching is important to you," Isaac protested. "It is your passion, your purpose. I cannot be the reason you lose that." "You are not the reason," Lillian insisted. "Prejudice is the reason, and even if I lose this position, I will find another. There are other towns, other schools, but there is only one you, and I am not giving that up." Isaac pulled her close, right there on the main street where anyone could see, and held her tightly. "I love you," he said into her hair. "I love your courage and your principles and your stubborn refusal to compromise yourself for anyone." "I love you too," Lillian whispered back. "And we are going to get through this together." The next few days were tense. Some parents did withdraw their children from school, though fewer than Lillian had feared. Others, inspired by her stand or simply valuing her teaching abilities more than social conventions, kept their children enrolled. Mr. Chen became an unexpected ally, speaking publicly about the quality of Lillian's teaching and the absurdity of letting personal matters interfere with education. Isaac, meanwhile, faced his own challenges. Some of the ranch hands teased him mercilessly about courting above his station, though it was mostly good-natured ribbing. More seriously, A few of the other ranchers in the area made it clear they disapproved, suggesting to Mr. Bennett that perhaps Isaac was not the right man for the foreman position if he could not maintain proper boundaries. Mr. Bennett, to his credit, told them exactly where they could put their opinions. He was a crusty man in his 60s who had never married and had little patience for social niceties. When he summoned Isaac to his office, Lillian worried her relationship had cost him his job. But instead, Bennett offered Isaac a deal. "You have been talking for years about wanting your own place," Bennett said gruffly. "I have 200 acres on the north edge of my property that are not much use to me, too far from the main ranch, too small to justify the effort of working them. I will sell them to you for a fair price, let you pay in installments over 5 years. You can start building your own herd, your own future." Isaac was stunned. "Mr. Bennett, I do not have enough saved for a down payment on that much land." "Sure you do," Bennett said, pulling out a ledger. "I have been setting aside part of your wages for the past 3 years, investment in the ranch profits you earned with your good management. You have more than enough." "I do not know what to say," Isaac managed, his voice rough with emotion. "Say you will stop worrying about what other people think and build the life you want with that schoolteacher of yours," Bennett replied. "She is good for you. First time I have seen you believe you deserve something good. Now get out of here and go tell her the news." Isaac rode straight to the schoolhouse, arriving just as Lillian was dismissing her students for the day. He waited until the children had scattered before approaching, his face alight with an excitement she had never seen. "I have something to tell you," he said, practically bursting with the news, "and something to ask you." Lillian set down the slate she was cleaning, giving him her full attention. "I am listening." Isaac told her about Bennett's offer, the words tumbling out in a rush. "It is not much land, but it is enough to start. I can build a house, run a small herd, maybe breed horses too. It will be hard work, probably years before it turns a real profit, but it would be ours." "Mine," he paused, taking both her hands in his. "Ours if you will have me." "Lillian Reynolds, will you marry me?" Joy bloomed in Lillian's chest, so intense it was almost painful. "Yes," she said immediately. "Yes, absolutely yes." Isaac swept her up in his arms, spinning her around in the small schoolhouse, both of them laughing with pure happiness. When he set her down, he kissed her thoroughly, neither of them caring that they were in full view of anyone who might pass by the window. "I want to do this properly," Isaac said when they finally broke apart. "Court you the way you deserve, with everyone knowing we are building a future together. No more hiding or worrying about what people think. You were right about that. We deserve to be happy." "We absolutely do," Lillian agreed, her face aching from smiling. "When should we get married?" "How does spring sound?" Isaac suggested. "That gives me time to build at least the basics of a house. I will not have you living in a tent on our wedding night." "Spring sounds perfect," Lillian said. "Though I would live in a tent with you if necessary. The location matters less than the company." They told Mrs. Patterson that evening, and she immediately began planning, declaring that Shoshone would have the finest wedding it had ever seen. Word spread quickly through town, and the response was mixed but generally more positive than negative. Most people were simply excited about having a celebration to look forward to. The school board, faced with overwhelming support for Lillian from parents whose children remained in her classes, grudgingly dropped the matter of her conduct. Mr. Chen made it clear that if they dismissed her, he would lead an effort to form a new school board, and most people agreed he had the community support to do it. Through the long Idaho winter, Isaac worked on their house. He spent every spare moment on the 200-acre plot that would become their ranch, clearing brush, laying foundation stones, cutting and shaping lumber. Lillian joined him whenever she could, helping with tasks within her ability and learning new skills under his patient instruction. They made a good team. Isaac taught Lillian about construction and land management, while she helped him with paperwork, planning, and the 1,000 details involved in starting a business. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire in the partially built house, wrapped in blankets against the cold, talking about their future. "What should we call it?" Lillian asked one frigid January evening. "The ranch needs a name." Isaac considered, staring into the flames. "Something about new beginnings, maybe. A fresh start." "The Horizon Ranch," Lillian suggested, "because we are looking toward our future together." "I like that," Isaac said, pulling her closer. "The Horizon Ranch it is." As winter turned to spring, the house took shape. It was modest but well built, with 2 bedrooms, a main living area, a kitchen, and a covered porch facing west toward the mountains. Isaac crafted the details with the same care he had shown with Lillian's trunk, installing windows that fit perfectly, building cabinets with dovetailed joints, carving decorative elements into the posts and railings. "This house will last 100 years, Mr. Bennett declared when he came to inspect the progress. "You have built something solid here, Isaac, something to be proud of." Isaac looked at Lillian, standing in the doorway of their soon-to-be home, and smiled. "I have built a lot to be proud of." They were married on a warm day in late April, when wildflowers covered the meadows and the aspens were showing their first green leaves. The ceremony took place at the church in Shoshone, with nearly the entire town in attendance. Lillian wore a simple but beautiful white dress that Mrs. Patterson and several other women had helped her sew, and she carried a bouquet of spring flowers that Isaac had picked that morning. Isaac wore new clothes purchased specially for the occasion, though he still looked slightly uncomfortable in formal attire. But when Lillian walked down the aisle toward him, his face transformed. All the careful guardedness, all the self-doubt that had characterized him when they first met, was gone. He looked at her with uncomplicated love and joy, and Lillian knew she had never seen anything more beautiful. The circuit preacher performed the ceremony, his words about commitment and partnership resonating deeply. When it came time for the vows, Isaac held Lillian's hands gently, his rough palms warm against hers, and spoke in a clear, steady voice. "Lillian, you taught me that I am worthy of love, that my hands and my work have value beyond what I imagined. You challenged every limitation I placed on myself and showed me a future I never dared dream about. I promise to spend every day trying to be worthy of the gift you have given me. I promise to support your dreams as you have supported mine, to be your partner in every sense of the word, to love you with everything I am." Lillian could barely see through her tears as she made her own vows. "Isaac, you showed me that true worth has nothing to do with education or social position, and everything to do with character and integrity. You are the kindest, strongest, most genuine person I have ever known. I promise to remind you every day of your value, to build this life alongside you, to face whatever challenges come with courage and love. You are my home, my heart, my future." When the preacher pronounced them married and told Isaac he could kiss his bride, the entire church erupted in applause. Isaac cupped Lillian's face in his work-roughened hands and kissed her with tender passion, neither of them hearing anything but each other for that perfect moment. The reception was held at the community hall, with food contributed by half the town and dancing that lasted well into the evening. Isaac, who claimed he did not know how to dance, proved surprisingly adept once Lillian convinced him to try. They swirled around the floor together, laughing when they stumbled, not caring that they were not particularly graceful, simply happy to be together. Mr. Bennett cornered Isaac at one point, pressing an envelope into his hand. "Wedding present," he said gruffly. "Deed to that land we talked about, paid in full. You have already earned it with your years of work, and I will not have you starting married life in debt. Build something good here, both of you." Isaac was speechless, managing only a rough thank you before Bennett waved him off and went to get more punch. Lillian watched her new husband blink back tears and felt her heart overflow with love for all of it. For him, for this community that had come to accept them, for the life they were beginning together. They spent their first night as husband and wife in their new house, alone finally under their own roof. Isaac carried Lillian over the threshold, both of them laughing at the traditional gesture, and set her down gently in the main room he had built with his own hands. "Welcome home, Mrs. Brennan," he said softly. "I love the sound of that," Lillian replied, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Though I will keep my name for teaching. Lillian Reynolds Brennan has a nice ring to it." "Anything you want," Isaac agreed, pulling her close. "I just want you happy." "I am," Lillian assured him. "Happier than I ever thought possible." They made love that night with tender passion, learning each other slowly, taking time to explore and discover. Isaac was careful with her, his rough hands surprisingly gentle, and Lillian marveled at how perfectly they fit together, how right everything felt. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the bed Isaac had built, looking out the window at stars scattered across the dark Idaho sky. "Do you ever regret leaving Philadelphia?" Isaac asked quietly, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "Not for a single moment," Lillian answered honestly. "Everything I gave up there was nothing compared to what I found here. You, this life, the freedom to be myself. I would make the same choice 1,000 times over." "I am glad," Isaac said, pressing a kiss to her forehead, "because I cannot imagine my life without you now. You changed everything for me, Lillian. You made me believe I could be more than I was." "You were always more," Lillian corrected gently. "I just helped you see it." The first year of their marriage was filled with hard work and simple joys. Lillian continued teaching, now traveling the 5 miles from their ranch to Shoshone each day. Isaac built up their herd slowly but steadily, starting with a dozen cattle purchased from Bennett and gradually expanding. They worked side by side whenever possible, building fences, tending animals, improving their property. Money was tight, as Isaac had predicted, but they found richness in other ways. Long evenings reading aloud to each other, Lillian's voice bringing books to life while Isaac worked on carving or leatherwork. Weekend rides through the beautiful Idaho landscape, exploring valleys and mountains that were now their home. Quiet mornings watching sunrise from their porch, coffee in hand, planning their day together. Lillian had never been happier. The work was harder than anything she had done before, her hands developing calluses of their own from helping with ranch tasks. But she loved the physical tiredness at the end of each day, the tangible evidence of accomplishment. She loved teaching her students, and then coming home to teach Isaac about literature and history, while he taught her about horses and cattle and the practical skills of frontier life. The following spring, Lillian discovered she was pregnant. She told Isaac one evening after dinner, simply stating the fact and watching his face transform from confusion to understanding to pure joy in the space of a heartbeat. "A baby," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "We are going to have a baby." "Yes," Lillian confirmed, laughing at his stunned expression. "Sometime in early autumn, I think." Isaac crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms, holding her as though she were made of glass. "I am going to be a father," he said wonderingly. "I never thought. I mean, I hoped someday, but—" He pulled back to look at her face, his eyes suspiciously bright. "Are you happy about this? I know we did not plan it so soon." "I am thrilled," Lillian assured him. Surprised but thrilled. Are you? More than I can say, Isaac replied, one hand moving to rest gently on her still flat stomach. A child, our child. God, Lillian, what if I do not know how to be a good father? What if I make all the same mistakes mine did? You will not, Lillian said firmly. Because you are already aware of those mistakes, already thinking about how to do better. Our child will grow up knowing they are loved and wanted, knowing they can dream as big as they want. You will make sure of that. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer. Lillian taught until the school term ended, then spent her days helping as much as she could with lighter ranch tasks while Isaac fussed over her constantly, insisting she not overwork herself. She found his protectiveness endearing even when it became excessive. I am pregnant, not made of porcelain, she reminded him one day when he tried to prevent her from carrying a bucket of chicken feed. Women have been doing this for thousands of years while continuing their normal lives. Those women were not carrying my child, Isaac replied stubbornly, taking the bucket from her anyway. Humor me, please. I just want to take care of you. You do take care of me, Lillian said softly, running her hand along his jaw. Every single day, but you need to let me take care of you too. That is what marriage is, caring for each other. Isaac set down the bucket and kissed her, slow and sweet. I know. I am just scared something will go wrong. I lost my mother this way, the thought of losing you. You will not lose me, Lillian promised, though she knew such promises could not truly be made. I am strong and healthy, and when the time comes, we will have Mrs. Patterson and the midwife right here. Everything will be fine. Their son was born on a crisp October morning, arriving quickly and with surprisingly little complication. Isaac held Lillian's hand through it all, his face pale but determined, refusing to leave even when Mrs. Patterson suggested it might be better for him to wait outside. When the baby finally emerged, crying lustily and waving tiny fists, Isaac wept openly, all his carefully maintained composure crumbling at the sight of his son. He is perfect, Isaac said, his voice rough with emotion as the midwife placed the cleaned and swaddled baby in his arms. Look at him, Lillian. He is perfect. He is, Lillian agreed, exhausted but exhilarated, watching her husband cradle their child with infinite gentleness. What should we name him? They had discussed names but never quite decided. Now, looking at the baby with his shock of dark hair and determined expression, Isaac said, Henry after my father, but we will call him whatever nickname suits him. He will make his own path, be his own person. Henry Brennan, Lillian said, testing the name. I like it. Strong but kind, just like his father. Isaac looked up at her, eyes still shining with tears. Thank you, he said quietly. For this, for everything. For believing in me when I did not believe in myself. For building this life with me. I love you more than I can say. I love you too, Lillian replied, reaching out to touch their son's tiny hand. And I love what we have created together. Not just Henry, but this whole life. This is everything I never knew I wanted. The next few years were a blur of activity and growth. Henry grew into a curious, energetic toddler who followed his father everywhere, mimicking Isaac's walk and trying to help with ranch tasks long before he was big enough to be useful. The ranch prospered, their herd growing steadily, their reputation for quality livestock spreading through the territory. Lillian eventually stepped back from full-time teaching to focus on the ranch and their growing family, though she tutored several students privately, and became involved in efforts to improve education throughout the region. She wrote articles about frontier education that were published in various newspapers, building a small reputation as an expert on the subject. 2 years after Henry's birth, their daughter Emma was born, named for Lillian's grandmother. She had her mother's red gold hair and her father's serious gray eyes, and from infancy showed a determined personality that promised interesting years ahead. Isaac proved to be a wonderful father, patient and playful, teaching his children about the land and animals while encouraging their curiosity about everything. He read to them every night, his rough voice gentle as he brought stories to life, determined that his children would have the educational opportunities he had missed. "I want them to have choices," he told Lillian one evening as they watched Henry and Emma play on the porch. "To know they can be anything they want, go anywhere they dream. Ranch life is good, but it should not be their only option just because it is what I know." "They will have choices," Lillian assured him. "We will make sure of it. But they will also have the foundation you are giving them, the knowledge that honest work has value, that family matters more than anything." The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and milestones. The children grew, the ranch expanded, their love deepened into something solid and enduring. Isaac never entirely lost his rough edges, but he learned to accept Lillian's love and his own worth. He still marveled sometimes that this life was his, that he had been lucky enough to find someone who saw past his calloused hands to the man beneath. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Isaac gave Lillian a carved wooden box he had been secretly working on for months. It was beautiful, made from cherry wood polished to a deep luster, with intricate designs covering every surface. Inside, carefully preserved, was the first bookmark he had made for her all those years ago, along with pressed flowers from their wedding bouquet. "I wanted you to have something that showed how I feel," Isaac said as Lillian examined the box with tears in her eyes. "My hands are still rough, still more used to ranch work than fine craftsmanship. But they make these things for you because I do not always have the words to tell you how much you mean to me." Lillian set down the box and took his hands in hers, just as she had done all those years ago in Mrs. Patterson's parlor. They were more scarred now, marked by a decade of hard work building their life together. But they were familiar and beloved, these hands that had held hers through joy and challenge, through births and losses, through every day of their shared life. "These hands are perfect," she said softly, echoing words that had become a refrain in their marriage. "Perfect for holding mine, for building our home, for creating our family. I would not change a single thing about them or about you." Isaac pulled her close, these rough hands cradling her face with exquisite tenderness. "I love you, Lillian Brennan. Best decision I ever made was letting you convince me I was worth knowing." "Best decision I ever made was coming to Idaho," Lillian replied, "and refusing to let you push me away when you were too stubborn to see your own value." They kissed, years of partnership and passion in the connection between them, while outside the sunset painted the Idaho sky in shades of gold and rose. Through the window, they could hear Henry and Emma playing, their laughter bright and carefree. The ranch spread around them, solid and thriving, built by work and love and determination. Years continued to unfold in patterns of growth and change. Henry developed a passion for breeding horses, showing an intuitive understanding of bloodlines and temperament that impressed even experienced ranchers. By the time he was 16, he was making significant contributions to the ranch's income through carefully selected breeding programs. Emma proved to have her mother's intellectual curiosity and her father's practical skills, equally comfortable discussing philosophy and birthing calves. The Horizon Ranch became known throughout the territory as a place of quality and integrity, where business was conducted fairly and workers were treated well. Isaac's reputation grew along with the ranch, though he never lost the fundamental humility that was part of his character. He served on the local Cattlemen's Association, mentored younger ranchers, and spoke up for fair practices in an industry that could be ruthless. Lillian became a prominent voice in education reform, eventually helping to establish a normal school in Boise, where frontier teachers could receive proper training. She traveled occasionally to give lectures, always returning home with relief, grateful for her work but happier still to be back with Isaac and their children. They faced challenges over the years, harsh winters that decimated their herd, requiring them to rebuild slowly. Illness that swept through the valley, taking neighbors and friends. The inevitable conflicts that arose in any partnership. But they faced everything together, their bond strengthened rather than weakened by adversity. On a warm summer evening when Isaac was 45 and Lillian 42, they sat together on the porch they had built so many years before. Henry was married now, living on his own section of the ranch with his wife and their infant daughter. Emma was at university in San Francisco, studying to become a veterinarian, determined to return to Idaho and apply modern medicine to frontier ranching. "Can you believe this is our life?" Isaac asked, his arm around Lillian's shoulders, her head resting against his chest. "Sometimes I still feel like that uncertain young man who was too afraid to admit he wanted more." "I am glad you found the courage," Lillian said softly, "though really I think I just did not give you much choice in the matter." Isaac laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "True. You were remarkably persistent. Thank God for that." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the mountains that had witnessed their entire life together. The land spread before them, marked by their labor and love, testimony to what could be built when two people believed in each other and refused to accept arbitrary limitations. "You have any regrets?" Isaac asked after a while. "About leaving Philadelphia, about choosing this life?" "You could have had so much more if you had stayed, married someone from your own social class, lived comfortably." Lillian sat up and turned to face him, taking his weathered face in her hands. "Isaac Brennan, after more than 20 years of marriage, you should know better than to ask such a ridiculous question. This life with you is worth more than any amount of comfort or social status. You gave me partnership, respect, love, and the freedom to be fully myself. That is worth everything." "You gave me the same," Isaac said, covering her hands with his. "You saw something in me I could not see in myself. You taught me I was worthy of good things, that my work had value, that I could dream bigger than I thought possible. Everything good in my life came from believing you when you said these hands were perfect for holding yours." "They are perfect," Lillian said, interlacing their fingers together, rough palms against soft, scarred hands and smooth, fitting together like they always had. "These hands built our home, our family, our entire world. How could they be anything but perfect?" As darkness fell and stars began appearing in the vast Idaho sky, they remained on the porch, holding hands and watching the world they had created together. Inside the house, lamplight glowed warm, and they could hear the sounds of Henry's family visiting, their granddaughter's laughter bright and innocent. "I want to grow old with you," Isaac said quietly. "Want to watch our grandchildren grow up. Maybe see Emma become the finest veterinarian in the territory. Watch Henry expand his breeding program. Want to sit on this porch with you when we are gray and slow, still holding your hand, still grateful for every day we have together." "That sounds perfect," Lillian agreed, her heart full to bursting with love for this man who had been brave enough to let her love him. "Every day with you is a gift, Isaac. From that first afternoon, when you helped me gather my scattered belongings to this moment right now, every single day has been worth more than I can say." They kissed as the stars wheeled overhead, two people who had found each other against the odds and built something lasting. The frontier around them was changing, growing more settled, losing some of its wild character. But the love between them remained constant, rooted as deeply as the mountains, as enduring as the land itself. Years continued to pass, bringing both joy and sorrow. They celebrated births and mourned deaths, welcomed new family members and said goodbye to old friends. Mrs. Patterson passed away peacefully in her sleep at 82, leaving the boarding house to a niece but remembered fondly by everyone who had known her. Mr. Bennett lived to 93, sharp and cantankerous to the end, leaving the original ranch to be divided among several families he had mentored over the decades. Isaac's hair turned silver, and his rough hands became more gnarled with arthritis, though he never stopped working entirely. Lillian's red-gold hair faded to a softer auburn streaked with white, and reading glasses became a permanent fixture. But they remained active and engaged, determined to live fully rather than simply exist. Emma returned from San Francisco with her degree and a husband, a fellow veterinary student who shared her passion for animal medicine. Together, they opened a practice in Shoshone, bringing modern techniques to frontier ranching. Henry's breeding program became renowned throughout the West, his horses sought after for their intelligence and temperament. The Horizon Ranch was passed to the next generation gradually, Henry taking over daily management while Isaac transitioned to an advisory role. But Isaac remained involved, unable to fully let go of the land and work that had defined so much of his life. Lillian finally retired from teaching at 60, satisfied she had made a lasting contribution to education in Idaho. On a spring afternoon when Isaac was 68 and Lillian 65, they walked together through the meadow where wildflowers bloomed just as they had on their wedding day 43 years earlier. Their steps were slower now, but their hands were still interlaced, rough and smooth, scarred and soft, fitting together perfectly. "You remember the first time we walked here?" Lillian asked, pausing to catch her breath and admire the view. "You were so nervous, convinced you were not good enough for me." "I was not wrong to be nervous," Isaac said with a smile. "You were way out of my league, still are, really." "Nonsense," Lillian said firmly. "We were always equals, partners. You just took a while to realize it." Isaac pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her from behind so they both faced the mountains together. "Best thing I ever did was listen to you. Well, that and let you convince me these rough hands were good enough to hold yours." "They were always good enough," Lillian said, leaning back against him. "These hands built everything that matters, our home, our family, our life. They are beautiful to me, Isaac, always have been, always will be." They stood together in the meadow, surrounded by wildflowers and memories, while the Idaho wind whispered through the grass. The ranch spread around them, thriving under the next generation's care, proof that what they had built would endure. Their children and grandchildren carried forward the values they had instilled, creating their own versions of happiness while honoring the foundation laid by Isaac and Lillian. "I love you," Isaac said quietly. "Every single day, I love you more. You took a rough cowboy who did not believe in his own worth and showed him what life could be. You gave me everything." "You gave me just as much," Lillian replied, turning in his arms to face him. "You showed me that true partnership has nothing to do with social status or education and everything to do with respect, trust, and love. You let me be fully myself while supporting every dream I had. We built this life together, Isaac, every beautiful piece of it." As the sun moved toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, they walked slowly back toward the house they had built with their own hands so many years before. Smoke rose from the chimney where Emma was preparing dinner, and they could hear Henry talking with his oldest son about the new foals in the barn. The porch where they had spent countless evenings still stood solid, the wood weathered but strong. They settled into the chairs Isaac had crafted decades earlier, still comfortable despite their age. Lillian reached for Isaac's hand, and he gave it without hesitation, their fingers interlacing automatically. "This is everything I wanted," Lillian said softly, watching the sunset paint the world in gold. "This life, this love, this family. Everything." "Everything and more," Isaac agreed, bringing her hand to his lips and kissing it gently. "These rough hands were made for holding yours, Lillian. For building our life, for creating our family, for loving you every day. I would not change a single moment." "Neither would I," Lillian said, her voice thick with emotion. "From that first day in Shoshone when you helped a stranger pick up her scattered belongings to this moment right now, every second has been a gift. You are a gift, Isaac Brennan, my greatest blessing." They sat together as darkness fell, hands clasped, hearts entwined, surrounded by the life they had built through courage and love and unwavering faith in each other. The frontier they had known was fading into history, but what they had created would endure through their children and grandchildren, through the values they had lived and the love they had shared. Inside the house, family gathered for dinner, multiple generations coming together in the home Isaac's rough hands had built. Laughter and conversation drifted through the open windows, the sounds of life and love and continuation. The Horizon Ranch stretched into the growing darkness, solid and enduring, testimony to what two people could build when they believed in each other. "Thank you," Isaac said quietly, his voice barely audible over the evening wind, "for seeing past my rough hands to the man I could be. For loving me when I did not love myself, for every single day of this life we have shared." "Thank you for letting me love you," Lillian replied, squeezing his hand gently, "for being brave enough to believe you deserved happiness, for building this beautiful life with me." "Your hands were never too rough, Isaac. They were always perfect, exactly as they were, because they were yours." As stars began appearing in the vast Idaho sky, Isaac and Lillian Brennan sat together on the porch they had built 4 decades earlier, hands clasped, hearts full, surrounded by the legacy of their love. Two people who had found each other against the odds, who had refused to accept society's limitations, who had built something lasting through hard work and unwavering faith in each other. The rough hands of a cowboy and the smooth hands of a teacher, joined together in partnership and love, holding each other through every joy and challenge, building a life that would endure long after they were gone. Perfect hands made for holding each other, for creating beauty, for loving without reservation or regret. And in the gathering darkness, as their family called them inside to share the evening meal, Isaac and Lillian rose together, still hand in hand after all these years, still partners, still deeply and completely in love. They walked into the warmth and light of the home they had built, surrounded by the family they had created, living proof that love, respect, and unwavering belief in each other could overcome any obstacle and build something truly extraordinary. Their story, born on a dusty street in Shoshone, Idaho in 1883, would be told and retold through generations, a testament to the power of looking past surface judgments to see the true worth of another person. A reminder that rough hands and smooth can fit together perfectly, that love recognizes no boundaries of class or status, that the greatest lives are built not through privilege but through courage, dedication, and the willingness to believe in possibilities others cannot see. And on quiet evenings when the wind whispered through the meadows of the Horizon Ranch, some said you could still hear the echo of their love, strong and enduring as the mountains, gentle and constant as the seasons, perfect in every way that mattered.